Welcome to a new chapter about information technology. Today's chapter is about data privacy. So, what is data privacy? Data privacy specifies how is the relationship between the collection and usage of data, technology on the one hand, and the public expectation of privacy and the legal and political issues surrounding them. That's quite abstract. So let's have a look on 3 examples. First, data privacy deals with protection against misuse in data processing. For example, if you have bookkeeping software, it has to do the bookkeeping in a correct way. The financial transactions shall be performed as expected and should not be reroute money to a wrong account. There is more. There is informational self-determination. That's what in Germany it's called informationelle Selbstbestimmung. Basically, it's the idea that all data which exist about a person belongs to that person. Nobody else is allowed to collect data about another person. That's true for companies, that's true for administration, official administration, but it's true for private persons as well. So you are not allowed, a company is not allowed to simply collect data about other people. As a consequence, companies might not share data with others about people. And self-determination means I can go to a company and ask them what data is available about me, and I can ask them to delete this data if I do not wish them to possess any data about me, unless the company has a good reason to keep it. To keep this informational self-determination, there is a primacy of data economy. In Germany, it's called Primat der Datensparsamkeit. In short, it means data which is not required must not be recorded. So if data is required, for example, you will start at the university, FH Aachen, and we need some data of you. For example, a name, maybe a date of birth. But there is no reason to ask for example, your hobbies, what have you done in the past, what are your future goals, etc. This is meant by primacy of data economy. We are just allowed to ask you for those data which are really required to run a contract with you as a student. Data privacy in the first place is not a technical issue. It is simply a law. It's regulated by laws. In Germany, we did have the Bundesdatenschutzgesetz and the Landesdatenschutzgesetze, so Federal Data Protection Act and State Data Protection Act. In the EU, we did have Datenschutzrichtlinien, privacy policies. And in Germany, the policy had been implemented by an update of the Federal Data Protection Act. That sounds a little bit complicated, and in fact, the EU and Germany have streamlined all their laws and have brought up the GDPR in 2018. We'll talk about it on the next slide. In comparison to the EU, the US data privacy is hardly regulated. From a European understanding, there is hardly any data protection, especially if public authorities, security agencies are interested in data, they can get whatever they want. Let's have a look on this General Data Protection Regulation, or in brief, GDPR. In German, this is called Datenschutzgrundverordnung or DSGVO. This has been enforced in May 2018. However, the law existed already 2 years before. So companies and administration had more than 2 years' time to prepare for this law. The GDPR is in the first place a regulation to harmonize and simplify the existing laws. There had been laws in each country, partially, like for example in Germany, due to the federal structure. We did even have Datenschutzgesetze, data protection laws for each state in Germany. So, what is it all about? Companies and administration and of course individual people have to carefully handle personal information. They must limit their greed for personal data. They must not forward personal data to third parties. And people, we, you, me, we have the right to view our personal data. So we can go to an administration or a company and we can ask, hey, what data is stored about me? And under certain circumstances, if the data is not required, if the data is wrong, we can ask for erasure or correction of the data. That doesn't sound too much, and actually most of these regulations had been in place before. But due to a very fast development of IT, neither companies nor public administration stick to these regulations. Actually, many of these regulations were really not present in companies. Example: the German Post handed over customer data to political parties in the elections 2017. So there is a postman coming to your house, he knows something about you, what kind of post you might get, and even if it's just the addresses, it's not allowed to simply pass it to political parties. German Post must not do that. Der Deutsche Städte- und Gemeindebund, a union of cities and communities, they do have data of all their citizens. And these data, they thought about selling it to marketing companies so that they can make use of it and shape their profiles. And we do not want to talk about companies like Google, Amazon and Co. who do lots of tracking, but as long as they do it in the US, on US web pages, it's hard to enforce our data laws, data privacy laws in there. One important change is violations become more expensive. And nowadays it's the CEO, it's the boss who is liable for data privacy. A loosely handled data privacy policy is interpreted as a failure by the management. So for example, if you as a CEO dedicate another person to be responsible for data privacy, but you do not give authority to this person, then in the end it falls back to you if the problem pops up. Penalties are limited up to only 4% of the company's revenue, which is much more than it has been before. And companies listed on the stock exchange might be accused by the shareholders if due to data privacy issues there is a certain kind of damage in the company. So there's two goals for the GDPR. The one is to streamline the laws, the other one is to make it more present, to bring it in the public that these laws exist. There are different perspectives on GDPR. Let's first take our perspective as people, as individuals. In principle, the processing and the collection of personal data, of data about me, is forbidden. The overall idea of the GDPR is that the storage and the processing and the collection of data about persons, so personal data, is forbidden. These data belongs to me and nobody else but me must collect data about me. However, there are exemptions. If information is required to fulfill a contract, then we can ask for data. So for example, you as a student do have a contract with us, the University of Applied Sciences. We must know if, for example, you have a grade at school which is required for our course of studies. We must know your name. We must know if you are, let's say, immatriculated at another university, if this is a contradiction with our laws and regulations. Take another example. To ensure legitimate interest, maybe data is required. If you take a credit at a bank, let's say about 10,000 euro, you cannot go to the bank and ask them, hey, please delete all data about me. Then simply this data about the credit would disappear and the bank could no longer track whom did she give any contract. Nice situation for you, but not in the interest of the bank. So if there is a legitimate interest, then of course the bank has the right to keep data about it. And most important, if you as a user give permission, for example, in Germany using our AGBs, the Allgemeinen Geschäftsbedingungen, the terms and conditions of a contract, then people might store data. And that's what happens most often. So if you, for example, go for the first time to a web page, if you, let's say, register there as a new user, let's say Amazon, then you will always have to accept these terms and conditions. And by that, you allow the company to simply process and collect and store data about you. But the principle is the companies have to first ask you. Prohibition of coupling is another thing. In the past, it has often been that if you buy something, especially on a web shop, you get advertisements. Nowadays, you will see that companies will ask, hey, you have bought this product, are we allowed to send you any information about new product developments? So this is due to this fact that we have this prohibition of coupling, and it means more. The company cannot argue, okay, I will only do this transaction with you if you allow me to send you advertisements. Compensation. In the past, only compensation has been possible for specific damages. So if you, for example, do not get a job because some company has not taken care and has not dealt according to data privacy laws, then you can ask for a compensation. Nowadays, this is possible even for stress, hassle and inconvenience. So the hurdles to get compensations have gone down. There are more things. Transparency is a must. Companies have to provide information to the concerned people about which data is stored and for what kind of purpose. So for example, if you have a look in the impressum of a website and you go there to the data privacy declaration, you often see information like we store IP addresses and we store when you have been here, and we use this for having and analyzing customers' behavior. So this kind of information, what data is actually stored and for what it is needed, has to be made public. There's special regulations for sensitive data, like for example, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, biometric data, and so on. These must only be handled in exceptional cases. And special protection exists for people under 16. There's the right to erasure. Under certain circumstances, the people can ask the companies to erase their data. For example, if you finally have finished your career at the FH Aachen, you might ask us to delete all our data in QIS. all your data in our database QIS, because there might not be a need any longer to keep it. We could maybe argue that at least we must store data about you so that you can simply, after failing in a certain course of study, restudy it again. But in principle, you have the right to erasure. There's a right to explanation of algorithmic decisions. It sounds a little complicated, so let's start with an example. If you go to a bank and ask for a credit, today there might be some kind of algorithm, some kind of computer in the background who makes this decision. And in this case, for example, you don't get a credit, you have the right to ask why, if this is an algorithmic decision. And then a human person must take the argument and give it to you why you don't get it. Actually, that's a problem. Because nowadays programs make use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and sometimes they do a decision, but they're not able to argue why they did do this decision. So here we're coming into a situation where a company like a bank might face problems. You have the right to obtain a portable copy of stored data. This idea is to avoid these big monopolies like Amazon or Facebook, which store lots and lots of data. So you have, for example, the right to ask Facebook, hey, please give me a portable copy, some maybe on a USB stick, as in a PDF format. And actually, there have been people who did so. So there is an Austrian activist who really forced it through that Facebook had to hand out all the data. So you got several parcels with several binders of thousands of pages where Facebook has printed out which information they had about this person. So the idea is simply to avoid monopolies. So if you have data at Amazon, they have made a profile of you, you can ask for this data and hand it over to another company. This doesn't sound really realistic, but in another situation it could be. For example, if you are at your doctor's and the physician has lots of data like X-ray photos and the complete history of your illness and so on, then you might want to change to another doctor. And you don't want to do all these X-ray photos again and again. And then you have simply a right to get a portable copy of this stored data to be able to move to another physician. Let's change the perspective. What does it mean if you're running a company or a public administration office? What does GDPR means for these? First, the question is, when is the GDPR applicable? And the easy answer is if personal data is handled. So if you have, for example, a company which is doing production and there is data about products, new products, and so on. And maybe there is another company, a competitor, who likes to grab this kind of data. Then yes, there is an argument to protect the data, but it has nothing to do with data privacy, because it doesn't deal with personnel data. So not always, if it's a good idea to keep data protected, it has to do with data privacy. Data privacy means we're talking about personal data about people. But this could be, for example, the case if you're talking about cookies. So if cookies are used, then you're in the area of personal data, because within the cookie there is an IP address, and the IP address might be used to track back to a certain person. So if you use cookies, you have to follow the GDPR rules. If you use Google Analytics, same issue pops up. If you forward a newsletter to customers, then you do have addresses or emails, and then we're talking about personal data. So GDPR is an issue here. So what do companies in this case have to do? They first have to officially announce a data protection officer. In Germany, einen Datenschutzbeauftragten. And if you do not officially announce somebody, then the CEO is by definition this protection officer. You have to create a binder of data processing activities. So we're talking about personnel data here. So if, for example, at our university, you're handing in personal data during this process of immatriculation, then this process, immatriculation, has to pop up in a document which lists all data processing activities. All processes connected to personal data have later on to be documented. And if sensitive data is taken care for example at physicians, a so-called impact analysis about data privacy has to be performed. So a physician must take care, must make an analysis what could happen and what are countermeasures and so on and so on. In the end, all efforts with respect to data privacy have to be documented. And that's, for some companies, really a huge effort, especially if you deal with people, with employees or with customers, which usually are individual people. In the EU, the GDPR has led to a situation that we have streamlined data privacy laws. So the data privacy laws are all the same in all countries. If you compare our regulations with the US, then from our perspective, these regulations are much weaker. Data to be protected, that is data about individuals, customers, employees, must therefore not be stored in the US. And this is an issue if you're talking about clouds. So the big cloud companies are Amazon, Google Drive, Microsoft, iCloud by Apple, and so on. Of course, this is an issue for these companies because they would like to make money with clouds and they would like to sell cloud services even to European companies. So what did they do? They argued we agreed to what was called safe harbor privacy principles. Basically, it means we, the companies, agree to the data privacy levels of Europe and we'll handle data accordingly. However, the American government argues into another direction. Yes, you can try to do it, but if we, the government, would like to get hold of the data, then you have to hand it out. Due to this conflict, the safe harbor principles the safe harbor contract has been cancelled by the European Court of Justice. In the following, the EU-US Privacy Shield was installed, a new attempt to get the same kind of data privacy levels into these companies. However, again, this contract was cancelled. There is a principal conflict. If the US government, the security agencies would like to get hold of certain data, the US government argues, hey, you're an American company, so you have to follow our laws. And even if Amazon places their server in Ireland or any other European country and argue, hey, yes, we are an American company, but here the server is not placed in the US, then the government still argues, doesn't mind, we don't care, it's an Amazon server, independent of where it is located, it falls under the US regulations. The discussion about these issues is going on. What does it mean for a German company, for a European company? European companies should not store their data, at least their personnel data, in clouds handled by the US companies. However, there's one exemption. If you are going to encrypt the data by yourself and only store encrypted data on these cloud platforms, then you're safe. At least if the encryption is strong enough to not be decrypted by anybody else. Why has become data privacy an issue? Simply because IT, information technology, has completely changed the situation. The situation, how we deal and what can we deal, how can we process information. Without information and information processing, we would not require protection of data and information. And if still we would mostly use paper and pencil, we would not be able to simply handle or process a big amount of data. We would not be able to create profiles and so on. That's why, due to the development of IT, data privacy has become a more and more important issue. For example, modern IT, with the help of modern IT, you can really analyze mass data. This hasn't been possible in the past. You can combine single data and create user profiles. And even so, if you have a situation where data is public available and is made public, it is not allowed, or it is an issue if you do it on a mass level. Take, for example, the following issue. There is data which is published on Facebook, and the user of Facebook has agreed to the situation, hey, it's public available. However, it's a different situation if you as an individual, as a human person, just have a look on a few pages at Facebook, or if you write a program of a web crawler which searches and analyzes millions of Facebook profiles. Here, due to a massive change of quantity in data, the quality changes in which data is used. And therefore, this kind of mass usage is sometimes forbidden, although the individual usage of the data is allowed. Having new technical capabilities, we are heading for new challenges which require new regulations. And there is an ongoing race between technique on the one side and the laws on the other side, just to keep them all in balance. Let's give an example. Customer analysis using Google Analytics. You can see on the right side there's a dashboard, and you can see user behavior over the past weeks. You can see when there have been many users on a certain web page, how long did they stay, and so on and so on. This data is visualized by a tool called Google Analytics, and in Germany, and that's probably the same for the European Union, more than 50% of all websites are analyzed by Google Analytics. Google enriches the data with their own data. So just going through the web log, it's, for example, not possible to see if there is a person is a male or female. However, if Google Ads enriches the data with their own data, you might be able to do so. And here you are getting into a conflict between data privacy and the wish to simply know as much as you like about your customers. So there have been regulations that the last byte of the IP address must be masked, must be X2A, so that personalization is not possible on a complete IP address. So you can see here, if in your weblog you see the IP address has been 149.234.1112, the last digits 12 have to be deleted to make data a little bit more coarse. If all companies stick to this rule, I don't know. There are many challenges in data privacy. One is, data privacy is one goal which conflicts often with other goals. For example, data privacy and data transparency. What kind of public data should be available, should be published or must not be published? Take Sweden, another company in the EU, which publishes all income taxes by all people. So in Sweden you can have a look and check how much is your neighbor earning and how much taxes does he pay. Or take data privacy and costs. As you could see, the documentation of all these activities having to do with personal data, these require many resources. So data privacy and costs are in a conflict. Moreover, if you take the costs which could be, or the profit which could be made by using personal information for marketing, then there is another conflict. Another conflict would be data privacy and security or fight against criminality. We all expect our state to keep the state secure and all places safe. But on the other hand, we don't want to be surveyed and tracked, for example, by the police. So how can we balance this situation out? What is the police allowed to do and what not? Another issue is data privacy versus research. Sometimes research is possible using anonymized data. For other cases, there are additional regulations. This is especially true, for example, in medicine. I assume you have heard about Big Brother, this phenomenon which was first described in the novel 1984 by George Orwell. Big Brother sees everything, knows everything, tracks everybody, and so on. So it is really the idea of somebody who is not good in data privacy. The Big Brother award is a negative award. It is assigned to administration and companies, to organizations and people. The award has been founded in the UK end of the 90s, but nowadays it is awarded in several countries. And to qualify, you have to affect the data privacy long-lasting and consequently. There are several categories, and you can have a look at the homepage bigbrother.awards.org or at Wikipedia to see some of the nominees and the winners. To really focus on these problems between conflicting goals, let's go through some of the winners. In this table you can see the winners from the Big Brother Award Germany in 2017. And in the following pages I will go through all these 4 cases and describe what kind of problems might be there. The first one is about PLT, Planning for Logistics and Transport, a company which developed a device which is assigned to employees, for example in big warehouses or in logistics companies. Using GPS, so global positioning systems, and mobile communication like GPRS, the exact position of each employee can be identified at all time. So you can track where people are, where do they go, etc., etc. You can create roaming profiles of each employee. Of course, that's not too comfortable for the employees if they are tracked. And from a legal point, probably we are within a gray area. From a business point of view, however, there are new opportunities, and maybe there is a good argument that the company would like to, in a best way, use resources to give good services to their customers. For example, if you think about logistic companies like UPS, you could optimize and adjust routes when you simply know where your drivers are. However, maybe we could say it's a misuse if we try to identify lazy employees. So if there is a picker in a logistic warehousing system, then there's one who's making kilometers and another one who is not doing that much. You can identify those people. Not sure if this is fair or it's unfair. So, question here is, should this tracking device be allowed? Another case is going to universities in Munich. They're offering online courses at Coursera. Coursera is one of the biggest provider of online courses, so-called MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. It's located in the US. Coursera tracks and analyzes the data of all participants. So you can follow if you have listened to a course, a lecture online. They can follow if you have stopped listening. You can do tests in between. Of course, the results are stored at Coursera. And in the end, they can identify who might be a good student and who is maybe a little bit lazy or not that into the course. This data has been sold to other companies and handed over to administration. So why are companies interested in this data? They could really address students which seem to be successful, which seem to be one of the best 10%, and try to offer them a contract. And administration? So if you think about the US administration, they take the data to decide if certain people are given a visa to enter the US, if they would like to employ for a job, or not, if they, for example, have proven to be lazy in these kind of courses. The Big Brother Award criticizes that the LMU-TU supports the collection of individual data by offering modules and lectures to students in this platform. Question: is this criticism justified? Isn't it, on the other hand, a very good idea to make modules and lectures publicly available to anybody in the complete world? In 2017, the German Armed Forces enabled a new department called Command Cyber and Information Room. Clearly spoken, this means the creation of a complete digital troop with a goal to have 14,000 people. Of course, the German Armed Forces have the right, maybe they have the duty, to protect itself against attacks, even virtual attacks with viruses and so on. The criticism focuses on the following points. The goal of this department takes care of IT security in all fields, not just military ones. This, however, is a field of the police. Moreover, the goal of this department is the intrusion into foreign IT systems. Question: is the criticism justified? Is it really possible to differ between internal attacks and external attacks? Is it really possible to shape in a clear way where the precaution can start and where the police and where this department is responsible? And moreover, if you're talking about a warlike situation, if you talk about a war and we're attacked by the foreign, isn't it our duty to attack the other side and to get information about the other side? So isn't intrusion, the possibility to do intrusion in other foreign systems, a must for something like the German Armed Forces? Finally, let's take a look at Prutzis, a company which works in the field of big data and creates profiles from potential customers. The idea here is to enforce price discrimination to reach an optimal price from a seller's point of view. For example, Mac users pay more, easy example, but For example, customers having an urgent need to pay more. They do not have the time to start bargaining. Mother coming home from work to fetch the kids from the kindergarten does not have the time to compare prices. Actually, prices are regulated centrally nowadays more and more. You can see that as gas stations. So the point here is, should companies be allowed to do this kind of price discrimination? Should they be able to offer different kind of prices to people depending on their user profile? And if yes, should they be able to create these user profiles and based on this user profile change prices? So, do we have a free market where prices are negotiated, or do we have to have fixed prices which are the same for everybody?